He thought control would keep his son safe, but then a simple song, and the woman he almost destroyed, proved him wrong. Victor Langston never liked surprises. That's why he spent thousands on the latest security system, tiny cameras tucked into corners of his massive glass-walled home in Scottsdale, Arizona. For him, control was everything. Control over his business, control over his employees, and, most importantly, control over his home. So, when his phone buzzed with an alert from the security app that afternoon, he didn't hesitate. He tapped the screen. The feed loaded. At first, he thought it was just the cleaning crew doing their usual routine, but then he froze. On the camera feed, right in the middle of his sun-drenched living room, stood Danielle Brooks, his housekeeper. She wasn't vacuuming or dusting. She was holding his son's hands, his paralyzed son. Ethan sat in his wheelchair, a thin figure in gray sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his head tilted toward Danielle. And she was dancing, slowly, gently swaying his boy side to side as if they were at some school prom. Music played faintly in the background, a song Victor hadn't heard in years. It wasn't just that she was dancing, it was the laughter. Ethan was smiling, a real smile, the kind Victor hadn't seen since the accident. For a moment, Victor just stared at the screen. He didn't know whether to be angry, shocked, or something else he didn't want to name. He zoomed in, as if that would make sense of what he was seeing. Danielle spun slightly, guiding Ethan's arms like they worked perfectly fine. Her face glowed with a joy that seemed out of place in his home. This wasn't part of her job. She had no right to cross boundaries like that. Victor's jaw clenched as questions swirled. Why was she touching his son without permission? What if she hurt him? What if something went wrong and Ethan fell, broke something? No one was supposed to handle Ethan except trained therapists, and even they were on a tight schedule. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a betrayal. He had trusted her in his home, near his son, and this is what she did when no one was watching? Victor snatched his car keys from the marble counter, his phone still streaming the video. Every step toward the door felt heavier than the last. If Danielle thought she could get away with this, she was about to learn who she was dealing with. But what Victor didn't know was that this so-called mistake would reveal more than just broken rules. It would uncover truths he never imagined. Victor Langston wasn't just wealthy. He was the kind of man whose name carried weight in boardrooms across the country. At 51, he owned one of the largest tech investment firms in the Southwest. People described him as brilliant, ruthless, and difficult. His Scottsdale mansion reflected him perfectly, sleek, modern, spotless, a fortress of glass, steel, and silence. Everything had a purpose. Everything was in its place. Victor didn't like chaos, not after what happened to his family 3 years ago. Back then, the Langstons were everywhere. Charity events, vacations, magazine covers. Then came the accident. One rainy night in Flagstaff, his wife lost control of the SUV on a slick road. The crash killed her instantly. Ethan survived. Barely. Doctors said the spinal cord damage was irreversible. Victor went from being a husband and father to a single parent with a child who could no longer walk, no longer run, no longer live the life he'd planned for him. And Victor blamed himself. He wasn't there that night. He was in California closing a billion-dollar deal. The guilt never left him, so he did what he knew best: control everything. Therapists, nurses, private chefs, housekeepers. Every hire was screened like a White House staffer. He laid down strict rules. No unauthorized contact with Ethan outside care routines, no personal relationships, no surprises. Victor believed order would keep things from falling apart again. It didn't make life better, but at least it made it predictable. Then there was Ethan. 16 now, he spent most days in his custom wheelchair, head bent toward an iPad or staring out the massive windows. He didn't talk much, not even to Victor. Before the accident, Ethan was wild, loved basketball, music, dancing around the kitchen with his mom. Now, his spark was dim, buried under pain and silence. Victor tried everything: state-of-the-art therapy, specialists, even experimental treatments overseas. Nothing changed. Eventually, Victor stopped trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. He convinced himself it was better this way. If he couldn't make his son happy, at least he could keep him safe. That's why seeing Danielle in that video hit him like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about breaking the rules. It was about breaking the wall he'd built to keep life from hurting Ethan even more. But who was Danielle Brooks, really? She'd only been working for him 6 months. On paper, she was perfect. 32 years old, glowing references, a steady record of housekeeping jobs, quiet, respectful. She never gave him a reason to doubt her. Until now. Victor gripped the steering wheel tighter as his black Range Rover cut through the desert highway. He replayed the footage in his head. Her laugh, Ethan's smile, that song. It was too personal, too intimate. Something about it gnawed at him. What gave her the right? And yet, somewhere deep, in a corner of his mind he didn't like to visit, was the memory of Ethan's grin. A real grin, one he hadn't seen in years. He shook it off. Feelings didn't matter, rules did. But when Victor finally walked through those glass doors, he wasn't ready for what was waiting. A moment that would push every belief he held about loyalty, love, and second chances. Danielle Brooks didn't look like someone who'd end up in a billionaire's mansion. Not because she lacked professionalism, she had that in spades, but because life had never handed her easy breaks. At 32, she carried herself with quiet strength, a mix of resilience and warmth that people noticed without her trying. She grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, the oldest of 4 siblings. Life there taught her 2 things: work hard and never stop caring. Her mother was a nurse, her father a mechanic, and when her parents split, Danielle stepped up. She juggled school, odd jobs, and babysitting so her younger brothers didn't go hungry. College wasn't in the cards, but compassion, that came naturally. When she moved to Arizona, it wasn't for glamour. It was survival. After her fiancé walked out 2 years ago, leaving her with bills and a broken heart, Danielle rebuilt from scratch. She took on house cleaning jobs, determined to stay honest, keep her dignity, and send money back home. That's how she landed here. Victor Langston's home was different from anywhere she'd ever worked. Silent halls, rooms that felt more like museum displays than living spaces. And then there was Ethan. The first time Danielle saw him, he barely looked up. 16 years old, handsome in a fragile way, with deep brown eyes that seemed to hold storms. His wheelchair sat in the corner like an anchor. "Hey there," she'd said softly, balancing a basket of folded towels. No response. Danielle wasn't the type to give up easy. Day after day, she greeted him with a smile. Sometimes she'd hum while dusting shelves, pretending not to notice when Ethan's eyes flicked toward her. She didn't push. She just stayed kind. And then came the breakthrough. It happened 2 months ago on a sunny afternoon. Danielle was cleaning near the grand piano when her phone slipped from her apron. A song spilled out, "Lovely Day" by Bill Withers. Danielle froze, embarrassed, but before she could grab the phone, she heard it. A sound so soft she almost missed it. A laugh. She turned. Ethan was smiling. A small, crooked smile, but real. "You like this one?" she asked. He nodded, just once. That was the first time he'd responded to anyone in weeks. From then on, music became their secret language. She'd play old soul tracks while tidying up, watching his face light up in a way words couldn't reach. One day, when no one else was around, she did something bold, held out her hands and whispered, "Come on, let's feel this beat." Ethan hesitated, then placed his trembling fingers in hers. Danielle swayed gently, guiding him, letting the rhythm do what therapy couldn't. For a few minutes, he wasn't a patient. He wasn't broken. He was a teenager again. These moments weren't about breaking rules. For Danielle, it was about giving Ethan back a piece of his life, the piece the world had stolen from him. But now, standing in the sunlit living room, she had no idea her kindness was streaming straight to Victor's phone. No idea the man she worked so hard not to disappoint was on his way, furious, ready to tear her world apart. And when Victor walked in, his voice wasn't calm. It cracked through the silence like thunder, dragging Danielle and Ethan into a storm none of them saw coming. Victor drove like the road owed him answers. The Range Rover's engine growled down the long stretch of Scottsdale Highway, heat rising from the asphalt in shimmering waves. His grip on the steering wheel was so tight his knuckles whitened. Every time he blinked, the image replayed. Danielle spinning Ethan, laughter spilling across his living room, music pulsing softly through the speakers in the background. His son's fragile body moving in ways it shouldn't, ways the doctors warned against. Unbelievable, Victor muttered under his breath, pressing harder on the gas. Was this what happened when he wasn't around? When he trusted people? Rules existed for a reason. Those rules were written in blood and regret. They were born the night he buried his wife and swore nothing like that would ever happen again. Every caretaker, every assistant, every cleaner knew his policies. No touching Ethan outside of prescribed routines. No risks. Ever. Danielle knew, and she broke that trust. He imagined her calm face when he hired her, so polite, so eager to do things right. He had reviewed her file twice. Everything checked out. But now he questioned everything. The desert wind whipped through the cracked window, but Victor barely noticed. His mind was on Ethan. Was he hurt? Did she strain something? One wrong move could send him into pain for weeks, maybe worse. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel in frustration. How dare she? The words came out sharper than he intended. This wasn't her home. This wasn't her son. And yet, that smile. Ethan's smile haunted him as much as the dance. It had been years since he saw that expression. Pure joy without shadow. It was like looking at the boy he used to know before the accident stole everything. Victor swallowed hard, jaw tightening. He wasn't going to think about that. Not now. Emotions had no place in decisions like this. The gates of his estate came into view. He pressed the remote, and the black iron bars slid open like jaws, ready to swallow him whole. Gravel crunched under the tires as the SUV snaked up the long driveway. His chest tightened with every turn of the wheels. By the time he parked outside the front entrance, his pulse hammered against his ribs. He snatched his phone and replayed the video one last time. Danielle's face filled the screen. Soft smile, hair tied back, hands cradling Ethan's as they moved in slow circles. Victor shoved the phone into his pocket and stepped out. The Arizona heat hit him like a wall, but inside, he felt colder than ever. The moment his shoes struck the polished marble floor, the stillness of the house wrapped around him like a noose. From the hallway, he could hear faint music still playing, a soulful melody dripping with warmth. It felt wrong here, in this space built on order and silence. Voices floated in from the living room, a laugh, Ethan's laugh, and Danielle's, soft and warm, like honey over gravel. For a second, Victor froze. Something twisted inside him, something he refused to name. He straightened his shoulders, each step heavy with restrained fury, and strode toward the sound. The sight stopped him cold. There they were, exactly as the camera showed. Ethan beaming, his head tilted toward Danielle, who swayed gently with him, their hands linked like an unspoken promise. The light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the scene like a picture Victor had no place in. Danielle. His voice cracked the air like a whip. She jerked, nearly losing her balance, and the music stuttered to a stop as her phone slipped from her apron pocket. Ethan flinched at the sudden silence, eyes darting between them. Mr. Langston, I didn't hear you come in. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. Victor stepped closer, each word slicing the space between them. What are you doing? Danielle opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. She dropped her gaze, fingers twitching nervously against her apron. I was just what? His tone rose like a storm gathering force. Risking my son's life? In my house? After I made the rules crystal clear? Ethan tried to speak, his voice weak. Dad, not now, Ethan. Victor didn't even look at him, his eyes locked on Danielle, fire burning behind them. Her breath hitched, but then something changed. She straightened, eyes firming like steel under pressure. It's not what you think, she said softly. Victor's laugh was short, bitter. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like betrayal. But the words Danielle spoke next didn't just defend her actions. They cracked open a door Victor didn't even know existed. And behind it was a truth he wasn't ready for. Danielle stood her ground, though her hands shook at her sides. Victor's shadow loomed across the floor like a threat, but she refused to back away. Ethan's eyes darted between them, panic stirring behind his glasses. Mr. Langston, Danielle began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Please, just let me explain. Explain what? Victor's voice cut through hers like a blade. That you thought the rules didn't apply to you? That you could take liberties with my son's condition because... What? You were bored? Her mouth fell open, and then, snap, it shut again. Danielle's pulse pounded in her ears, but anger licked up her spine. No, because your son needed it, she said, louder this time. Victor blinked, stunned at her tone. No one ever spoke to him like that. You think I don't know what my son needs? He shot back, taking another step forward. His voice boomed in the marble room, bouncing off walls that had never heard so much as a raised voice in years. I've spent millions on doctors, therapists, specialists from all over the country. And you, he jabbed a finger at her chest. You're a housekeeper. Don't you dare tell me what he needs. Danielle flinched but didn't break. You're right. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. But I am someone who cares enough to actually look at him, not his chart, not his bills, him. Victor's jaw clenched so hard it ached. Don't lecture me about care. Everything I do, everything I have, is for Ethan. Everything you have, she said quietly, eyes glistening, isn't what he wants. The words landed like a slap. For a second, silence filled the room. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Victor's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. What did you just say? Ethan spoke up, voice cracking. Dad, she's right. Victor spun toward him. Ethan, stay out of this. No! The boy's voice shook, but it was louder than Victor had heard in months. You don't get it. She makes me feel like I'm still me. Victor's throat tightened. You think I don't want that for you? Ethan's hands trembled on his chair's armrests. You want control, not me. Not the old me who laughed and danced with Mom in the kitchen. You want the version the doctors gave you, but I hate it. His voice cracked like glass. I hate this. Victor froze. Words failed him for the first time in years. Danielle knelt by Ethan, her voice soft now. That's why I danced with him, she said, eyes never leaving Victor's. Because in that moment, he wasn't broken. He wasn't a patient. He was a kid who just wanted to feel the music again. Victor's breath came uneven now. He wanted to shout, to demand order, but her words dug under his skin like thorns. Images flashed. His wife, twirling Ethan in their old kitchen, laughter echoing as he watched from the doorway. Danielle stood slowly, squaring her shoulders. If you want to fire me, do it. But don't you dare tell me what I saw in his eyes wasn't real. Victor's fists unclenched. His anger didn't vanish, but something heavier settled in. Doubt. For years, doubt had been his enemy. Now it wrapped around him like chains. For the first time, Victor looked at Ethan, not his chair, not the accident, not the broken pieces, but his son. And what he saw wasn't compliance. It was pain. It was hunger for something Victor had buried under layers of rules. He turned away, dragging both hands over his face. His chest heaved. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Victor whispered, "Get out." Danielle stiffened. "What?" "Get out," he said louder, voice cracking like dry wood, "before I change my mind about calling the cops." Ethan's cry pierced the silence. "Dad, no!" Victor didn't turn. His back was a wall as he stormed toward his study, leaving Ethan sobbing and Danielle frozen in the sunlight that suddenly felt colder than ice. But Danielle wasn't gone yet, and the truth she carried would bring Victor to his knees before the night was over. Danielle didn't move, not when Victor's heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway, not when the study door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass panels. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her fingers curled so tight they left crescents in her palms. Ethan's voice broke the silence first. "Danielle?" His eyes brimmed with tears. I'm sorry, I didn't think he'd..." She shook her head, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't you dare apologize. You did nothing wrong." Her voice softened, trembling. "Nothing." From the hallway came the muffled echo of Victor's voice, a low rumble, like a storm behind closed doors. Danielle heard drawers slam, something heavy thud against wood. She knew that sound. Rage with nowhere to go. Her gut told her to leave, grab her bag, and never look back. But one glance at Ethan's trembling hands anchored her to the spot. He needed someone to fight for him. Maybe no one had before, but she would now. Minutes passed before Victor reappeared. His face was pale, his tie yanked loose, eyes burning like dry coals. In his hand, he held a single sheet of paper, creased, worn at the edges. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Why? The word was quiet, dangerous. Why do this? Was it money? Some sob story you thought would get you sympathy? Danielle blinked, stunned. What? Victor's glare snapped up, slicing through her. Don't play innocent. I ran your background again. You're clean, on paper, too clean. And then I dug deeper. He stepped closer, the paper trembling in his grip. You didn't mention your brother. Danielle's breath caught, her chest squeezed so tight it hurt. You went through my family? I protect my son, Victor growled. That means knowing everything about the people in his orbit. You lied by omission. You said you've never cared for anyone with a disability before, but your brother, James Brooks, car accident, spinal injury, died 2 years ago. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself on the edge of the couch. That wound, still raw, split wide open at the sound of his name. Say it, Victor pressed, voice cracking under its own weight. Say why you really wanted this job. Danielle's throat burned as words clawed their way out. Because I couldn't save him. The silence after felt louder than a gunshot. Her voice quivered now, but she kept going. James was 25, strong, funny, the best brother anyone could ask for. Then one night, her voice cracked, eyes glassy. One night, some drunk driver hit him head on. Just like that, everything changed. He couldn't walk, couldn't feed himself without help. And I swore I'd be there for him. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her chest. But I couldn't do enough. I worked 2 jobs to pay for his care. I stayed up nights holding his hand, trying to keep him smiling. And you know what he told me? Don't let them make me a ghost, Danny. Don't let them take my music. Tears streamed down her cheeks now, hot and unrelenting. So when he died, because the infection got too bad, I promised myself, if I ever saw someone like him again, someone fading behind walls and rules, I'd do whatever it took to give them a piece of their life back, even if it cost me everything. Victor stood frozen, the paper limp in his hand. Danielle's sobs filled the room like waves crashing against stone. For the first time in years, his fortress of certainty cracked. He turned slowly toward Ethan. His son's face was wet with tears, eyes blazing with something fierce. Dad, Ethan whispered hoarsely, she saved me. Victor swallowed hard, his chest caving under a weight he'd carried for too long. His own voice broke like glass. I thought I was protecting you. Ethan shook his head, his voice trembling but strong. You were protecting yourself. Those words gutted him, because they were true. Every rule, every wall, every camera, none of it was just for Ethan. It was for Victor's fear, his guilt, his inability to look at his son without seeing the ghost of a woman he couldn't save. Victor's breath came ragged now, his fists unclenched, the paper slipping to the floor. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at Danielle, the woman he nearly destroyed for daring to give his son something Victor never could, joy. And then something inside him snapped, not in anger this time, but in surrender. Danielle, his voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. Her eyes widened, confusion flickering through her tears. Victor turned to Ethan, kneeling so they were eye level. For the first time in years, his hands trembled as he cupped his son's face. I don't know how to do this, he whispered, voice breaking. But I want to try. If you'll let me. Ethan didn't speak. He just leaned forward, resting his forehead against his father's. And that single gesture shattered the last of Victor's armor. Behind them, Danielle quietly wiped her face, her heart pounding with something that felt like hope. But the night wasn't over yet, and Victor had one more decision to make. A decision that would change all of their lives forever. The room felt different now. The tension that once wrapped it like barbed wire had melted into something quieter, heavier. A silence filled not with anger, but with truth. Victor stayed there, kneeling by Ethan, until his son's trembling slowed. For the first time in 3 years, they weren't on opposite sides of a wall. When Victor finally stood, his face was pale, streaked with lines grief had carved over time. He turned toward Danielle. For a long beat, they just stared at each other. He looked like a man holding 2 lives in his hands, one ruled by fear, the other by faith. Don't leave, Victor said softly. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual steel. Danielle blinked, stunned. What? I said don't leave. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. About you. About everything. He glanced at Ethan, then back at her. You did something I couldn't. You gave him a reason to smile again. And I... His throat closed for a second before the words came out rough and raw. I'll never forget that. Danielle didn't move. The anger still simmered under her ribs, but his tone... It wasn't the same man who stormed in ready to tear her apart. This man sounded human. She crossed her arms, steadying her breath. I wasn't trying to disrespect you, she said quietly. I was trying to keep a promise. To someone I loved and to myself. Ethan deserves more than rules. He deserves life. Victor nodded slowly, eyes glistening though no tears fell. You're right. The admission seemed to cost him everything and free him all at once. He took a step closer. I don't want this house to feel like a prison anymore. Not for Ethan. Not for me. If you're willing, stay. Not as just staff. As someone who helps us build something better. Danielle's chest tightened. She searched his face for any sign of pride, of arrogance, but saw none. Just a man stripped bare, desperate to do right for his son. Finally, she nodded. I'll stay, but on one condition. Victor's brows lifted. Name it. No more cameras in rooms where Ethan spends his time, she said firmly. He needs trust, not surveillance. Victor exhaled, almost a laugh, but it cracked with something softer. Done. Danielle let out a slow breath she didn't know she was holding. For the first time that day, the corners of her mouth lifted. Ethan's voice broke through the quiet. Can we play the song again? His words were shaky, but filled with something neither of them had heard in years. Hope. Victor looked at Danielle. For a second, neither moved. Then she pulled out her phone and pressed play. Bill Withers filled the air once more, warm and rich, wrapping the cold marble room in something that felt like sunlight. This time, when Danielle reached for Ethan's hands, Victor didn't stop her. He didn't bark orders or list risks. He just stood there, watching, listening, as his son laughed softly through tears. And when Danielle looked up, she saw him smiling too. Not the forced smile he wore for business or charity galas. A real one. The kind a man wears when he remembers what love feels like. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely is. But in that room, 3 broken people started piecing themselves back together, with music, trust, and the courage to let go of fear. And that's the lesson, isn't it? Sometimes the walls we build to protect ourselves become the very prisons that keep us from living. Love doesn't happen in control. It happens in moments. Messy, fragile, human moments. If this story touched you, here's my question. What's the one thing you've been holding too tightly, afraid to lose? And what would happen if you let go, just a little? Take a second, think about it. And if this message hit home, share this video with someone who needs it. Because sometimes hope starts with a single choice, the choice to care.